Is the special relationship between Britain and the United States a myth? Well, the phrase was first coined in 1944 by Churchill. However, it didn't become popular till 1946 when Churchill used the phrase in a speech. Firstly, let's look at Yalta, where Roosevelt sidelined Churchill during these negotiations and sometimes had private conversations between him and Stalin and gave in to a lot of Stalin's demands. And also, he didn't back Churchill over Poland as well. The years after the war, cooperation between Britain and the United States was strong, with Britain getting the largest share of the Marshall Plan, and also the Americans helped during the Berlin blockade. In 1952, Churchill asked the Americans if they could station troops at Suez, and this was because Churchill was worried that Britain did not have enough troops to defend Britain, and also Britain was fighting in Korea at the same time, supporting the Americans. But the reason the Americans said no is because obviously, of course, they didn't agree with British imperialism, and you'd think Churchill would understand this. However, fast forward to 1956, the Suez crisis kicks off and Anthony Eden is now Prime Minister of Great Britain. And when this all kicks off, the Americans denounce Britain in the UN. They also threaten to sell bonds, and they also block IMF aid to Britain, and they also threaten sanctions as well. And of course, the crisis ends because Britain couldn't continue. In the 1960s, Dean Acheson says Great Britain had lost an empire but yet found a role, basically dissing Britain for their decline. And then on top of that, in the 1970s, Nixon and Kissinger are annoyed at Britain for not backing them enough and not backing American foreign policy. And also, they're annoyed that Britain's drift to Europe and becoming closer with them. Then comes the 1980s, and there is a special relationship between Thatcher and Reagan. However, they do have their disagreements, especially over Grenada, which at the time was a Commonwealth nation, and Queen Elizabeth II was the monarch. But when we go to the 21st century, Bush and Blair have a great relationship, and then Obama doesn't really care about Britain too much, and he doesn't particularly like Cameron too much, and it's clear when he basically says, Britain will be back of the queue for a trade deal, basically siding with the EU on that front, not really benefiting Britain at all. And then we get to Trump, and he's a complicated one because obviously he's put more recently tariffs on Britain, but he also goes on how much he loves the royal family, and also goes on about his Scottish heritage a lot. And of course, we got a better trade deal than Europe, but it's still tariffs on Britain. So it's a bit of a mixed one. And then Biden, again, a bit of a mixed one, but it's very interesting.